So the G7 meetings have kicked off in Italy with Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting his counterparts from France, Emmanuel Macron, and from the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak. So a very interesting agenda in front of the G7, ranging from climate change and indebtedness in developing countries to the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Joining me now is Geeta Mohan, who is the executive editor at India Today, who is on the ground in Italy covering the G7. And we have to ask for our very first question is what do you think is happening there? What do you think the key priorities are at the G7? How is the day likely to unfold for the Indian Prime Minister?
Well, it's a packed schedule for Prime Minister Modi. The meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky has begun. It's underway as we speak, Shashank, a very important one. We were discussing this yesterday and the day before, whether if there is going to be a bilateral meeting with the Ukrainian president or not. We were wondering if it's going to be a pull-aside chance encounter, but it's a bilateral meeting that really goes to show that India attaches a lot of importance to peace. More than anything else, it still stands by Russia. Russia is a very important partner of India. So it still stands by Russia, but the meeting is important because Ukraine also is a historical partner and friend of India. There are many students who were studying in Ukraine, who still study in Ukraine. There are many Indians who live in Ukraine and continue to live there. So it's a very important meeting that is taking place right now between India and Ukraine. The leadership meets. Before that, we had the Macron meeting, Rishi Sunak meeting. So crucial meetings underway, and then in the afternoon, he'll go for his outreach session, followed by yet some more bilaterals.
Right. Can you talk to us a little bit about what Prime Minister Modi is trying to get out of these meetings, and especially with the G7 outreach meeting? What do you think he's likely to push for? Are there any key priorities that India has from this G7 summit?
Well, digital, artificial intelligence, climate change, Mediterranean, the Indo-Pacific, and Africa. These are all key priority areas for India. But India is also going to look at how the world and the world leaders this time on day 2 are going to focus on China, that India is part of the solution and not part of the problem, that we are looking at becoming an alternative global in the global supply chain, and the fact that there cannot be war, a sustained, prolonged war, where there have been so many loss of lives of civilians. So these are areas that Prime Minister Modi is going to focus on. But the bilaterals are also crucial. What are the takeaways? That's a very important question, Shashank. The takeaways over here are the fact that India comes with a continuum, with a mandate for the third time. These world leaders know that they can engage very smoothly, very easily with a leader who's going to be in power for the next 5 years. So the deals, the conversations that were underway before India went into elections now can continue. There are other countries that are going into elections, and there things look very difficult for the leadership that has come for the G7 summit. UK, for example, Rishi Sunak in a very difficult position.
Absolutely.
Macron calling for snap elections after Le Pen really won massively at the in the EU elections. Clear signals for him to call for early elections while he can ride not a wave certainly, but that space where he still has numbers.
Right.
It seems like it is dipping, so everybody's scared they might not be in power. And Prime Minister Modi might be dealing with some other leader.
Right.
So if they're engaging India, it's because India has shown continuum. This is a continuum of the foreign policy that we will be seeing in the next 5 years.
Understood. You've talked about a number of the meetings. Let me ask you about 2 specifically. The first one is, of course, America. You had Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor of America, say that, of course, the 2 leaders would meet, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. He didn't specify the nature of that interaction. Are you hearing anything at all about what this meeting is going to be about? The first meeting between these 2 gentlemen since the Pannu assassination controversy broke. Do you think there's likely to be some tension in the room? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, they did briefly meet during the G20, and I suppose the American side by then had a lot of information on that front. But yes, this is going to be an important meeting. Now, we do not know the nature of the meeting because it does not seem like a structured bilateral. It could very well end up becoming a structured bilateral. A lot of the gaps where they're saying to be confirmed are spaces where these, world leaders could be scheduled. Right now, both sides are working things out. So, but there is going to be a meeting nonetheless.
Right.
Whatever the nature of the meeting is, it certainly is going to, the conversation is going to take forward the importance of the relationship between the two sides, but also maybe certain concerns would be raised. And if America raises those concerns of murder for hire charges, India, one, will maintain that, which India has maintained, that that's not India's modus operandi. One, that Gurpatwant Singh Panoon and trying to murder him in America is not India's modus operandi.
Right.
One is that's what they'll state. But secondly, India could raise concerns regarding growing Khalistani elements and space for these Khalistani elements in the United States of America. That what is the red line for free speech? The threats that are being made to Indian diplomats, the threat against missions, an Indian mission, the consulate in San Francisco was actually attacked. So we'll have to wait and see what the nature of that conversation is going to be. But should America raise Gurpatwant Singh Panoon case, there certainly is going to be India raising the Khalistani issue.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Does the fact that there isn't a structured bilateral meeting fixed yet, does it reflect something of the fact that, there has been a lot of chatter about tensions between India and America in recent months? Do you think that, of course, you had US Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell come out and having to address these rumors, which is quite extraordinary in itself, showed that there might be a little bit of a perception problem that the India-US relationship has. And now, if you were a viewer with a particularly suspicious, for example, or cynical mindset, you might think that actually the fact that you don't have a structured bilateral so far when you have them with Zelensky or so on and so forth might indicate that, in fact, there's a little bit of tension there in the relationship. Do you think there's anything to this, or are we speculating too much?
Well, I don't think there is. I don't think that would be the reading of most people if the leaders meet, because the leadership between India and US do not really have a lot of structured bilaterals. If they meet in such fora, they normally end up having a brief meeting rather than an elaborate one. It is not because of tensions. It's rather because there are too many engagements at too many levels between India and the United States of America. So the conversation is so constant between the two countries, Shashank, that they normally discuss everything threadbare at various levels. It only requires a brief conversation to reaffirm what the conversations are that are underway at various levels, whether it's official or ministerial. You will see a lot of ministerial level meetings. Jake Sullivan is going to be in India,
Sure.
and the National Security Advisor also has been reappointed. So expect Sullivan and Doval to really go ahead with that important meeting where I think the conversations about Gurpatwant Singh Panoon and murder for hire charges are going to come up more prominently than between Biden and Modi.
I understand. And of course, there is the second meeting that everyone wants to know about, which is the much awaited meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Melodi, as people are saying. Can you tell us a little bit about? I'm sure you've been on the networks all day. This has been a question that I'm sure has been thrown at you many times. Help us unpack this, right? How did this unlikely jodi of two world leaders come together? Like this is not something you see, especially the Indian Prime Minister or any Prime Minister really associated with this portmanteau Melodi. It seems quite new and quite special. Do you have anything to say about that? How did this come about?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. The social media will be a buzz. I suppose they're leaving the best for the last.
Right.
And we will have to wait and see how that really unfolds. The Indian community over here quite upbeat about the Melodi meet. So let's see how that really pans out, Shashank. I'll have to leave for a bit and I'll join you in just a bit if you can take over from here. And I shall see you on the other side in just a bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. So you heard it. That's what the major issues will be. As Geeta mentioned, we have meetings already with Prime Minister Sunak of the United Kingdom and President Macron of France. You will have now meetings with, we expect, the leaders of many of the most powerful countries in the world, including Japan, including including, we're told, the United States as well, but we're not exactly sure what structure that meeting is going to have. And of course, Geeta saying there that it really doesn't matter because whether they have a structured bilateral or not, because President Biden and Prime Minister Modi meet a lot. You don't need to have a structured bilateral, but nonetheless, there's been this background of issues where you have many observers questioning whether the India-US relationship has been the same ever since the murder for hire charges against the life of Gurpatan Singh Pannu, who is a very prominent pro-Khalistan figure. These allegations emerged in the American media, in actually first the Financial Times and then later in other American media outlets, that India may have been involved in an assassination plot against Mr. Pannu. This has been something that India's government and America's government have been discussing at the highest levels. In fact, even when talking about this meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, Jake Sullivan, who's the National Security Advisor of the United States, actually came out and and mentioned Pannu as well, the Pannu case, and said that, look, we expect to have some very senior level conversations. So you can see this is not an issue that has disappeared in any way, and its salience, its staying power in bilateral ties is something that observers have commented on. This idea that, look, is the India-America relationship where it should be? But look, we also have something else interesting that's going on with the India-Italy relationship. That's a relationship that over the last 10 years has absolutely taken off. It at one point in time was a very difficult relationship with things like defense, trade, so on and so forth, being blocked because of the 2013 Augusta-Westland scandal and so on and so forth. But now, of course, we have a situation where the two countries, especially because Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Meloni, seem to be getting along quite well together. And of course, we also had the Italian ambassador, Vincenzo De Luca, speaking to us earlier this week. We had an in-depth conversation with him, or rather, should I say, Geeta Mohan had an in-depth conversation with him, and we should be playing that for you in just a bit.
What are the expectations on the bilateral front?
The expectation is to take stock of the important progress we have already achieved only 1 year after the launch of the strategic partnership. We have signed the defense agreement, the mobility agreement, the space agreement. We have already working group in place for the implementation of defense agreement. On mobility, we have a first working group at the end of June. We have dramatically increased the number of Indian migrants, official and legal migrants from India to Italy, thanks to this agreement.
So there is going to be more mobility, more jobs for Indians?
Done last year and 23 and 24, even more. And this agreement will offer further opportunities for Indian migrants, official and legally organized from India to Italy. Because this is an interest of Italian government, as is also an interest of Indian government to offer opportunities of job also in Italy.
When we talk about India-Italy defense bilateral cooperation, defense certainly becomes a very important part. So any new projects being announced, is there anything on the defense front that India or Indians should be looking forward to?
We have already launched in the last few months some important industrial projects after the signing of the strategic partnership in electronic of defense, in guns, and we are exploring further opportunity in other sectors of the defense industry, because our company now are more proactive to exploring all the opportunities to invest here in India, also in the framework of Invest India, Make in India and Invest India. So I think there are enormous opportunities. We will have also in October the coal port of our, for the first time, of our air carrier Cavour. That will be a milestone in the collaboration between the two marines. So I think we have done a lot, and this further meeting will be an opportunity to endorse new projects, new activity, and new initiative in the coming months and years.
So when is the port of call happening?
Will be in Maharashtra in October.
Oh, that's significant. That clearly shows how India and Italy, in terms of maritime security, in terms of security cooperation, is actually growing stronger. Apart from defense and mobility, we've spoken of that. Any other announcements that we can expect between the two leaders? Because they will be meeting. It's a special moment again. It's always special when the two leaders meet. Any big announcement?
I cannot anticipate all the content of the summit, but certainly will be new progress, new advancement, new achievement, new progress, I repeat, in the pillars of the strategic partnership, either energy transition, cyber, space and defense, certainly.
Okay, and finally, zooming out a little from India, talking about the larger picture, European Union elections underway, and Italy has done splendidly well. Reports coming in that that Italy is kingmaker, that Prime Minister Meloni is going to be kingmaker in the EU elections. How do you see the elections panning out for Italy, and decisions that European Union will have to take in a time and period which is fraught with wars, conflicts, economic crisis?
Yes, Italy has already played an important role in the last few years in the major decision of European Union, both in security, defense, but also in the economic field, and will play an even more important role in the coming mandate of the new Parliament of the European Union. Also because Italy is a founding country of the European Union, and the weight and the leadership of Prime Minister.
And so there you had it, some of the most important topics of discussion in the India-Italy relationship that will also be taken up later this evening when the meeting of Prime Minister Modi with Prime Minister Meloni takes place. That's it from us from now. We'll keep bringing you the latest updates. Until then, we have some visuals for you from the G7 meeting in Italy.